culture belong to. In 1959, evidence of a culture that came to be known as Early Tao culture was discovered at Early Tao village in Yanshi, Hunan province. Early Tao culture thrived 3,500 to 3,800 years ago. We now know that this place was the capital city of the Xia dynasty, China's first dynasty. Early Tao culture marks the end of the Neolithic age and the beginning of the Bronze Age. This is pottery unearthed at Early Tao, and this is pottery discovered at Jiahu. They are obviously quite different. Early Tao pottery is grey, and it is decorated with well-designed patterns. Jiahu pottery, on the other hand, is brownish-red, and it features simple, crude patterns. This tells us that the Jiahu ruins are older than the ruins of Early Tao culture. In 1928, ruins of an ancient culture were discovered at Longshan village in Longshan, Jiangqiu, Shandong province. This culture, which thrived 3,950 to 4,350 years ago, is today referred to as Longshan culture. Longshan culture was spread over parts of Shandong province and Hunan province. As the culture can be distinguished by its exquisite black pottery artifacts, Longshan culture holds an exalted position in the history of Chinese pottery. This pottery was already being made using a pottery wheel, and the way Longshan potters used the wheel gave their pottery a unique shape. Some of the pieces are called eggshell pottery because they are so very thin and even. Longshan pottery is technically superior to and more beautiful than Jiahu pottery, and this suggests that Jiahu culture appeared before Longshan culture. In 1921, the site of an ancient culture was discovered at Yangshao village, Mianshi County, Sanmenxia Prefecture, Hunan province. Yangshao culture existed from 7,000 to 5,000 years ago. Yangshao culture manifests the features of early Longshan culture. Most of the pottery artifacts unearthed from sites of Yangshao culture are red, and they can be divided mainly into fine red clay pottery and sand-mixed red clay pottery. Many pieces have geometrical patterns or animal figures painted on them. As this is the most distinctive feature of Yangshao culture, it is referred to as a painted pottery culture. Jiahu pottery bears grey and black spots, a result of incomplete oxidation caused by firing at too low a temperature. Jiahu pottery is not painted, it features only simple engraved patterns. This shows that the pottery-making techniques used to make these artifacts were not yet mature. However, it is easy to see that the color of early Yangshao pottery is very similar to that of Jiahu pottery. In both cases, the pieces generally fall into the red sand-mixed pottery category, in which the walls of the objects are 1 to 3 centimeters thick. In addition, the methods used to produce them were quite similar. They were both built up from clay strips and then patted smooth and fired. Both the aesthetics of the artifacts and the methods used to make both Jiahu pottery and Yangshao pottery indicate that they shared a common origin. Zhu Zhi noticed these similarities. It seemed to him that Jiahu culture predated Yangshao culture.
Just what was the relationship between Jiahu culture and Yangshao culture? While pondering this question, Zhu Zhi turned his thoughts to an important discovery made a year before, one that had caused a sensation in Chinese archaeological circles.
In 1977, a Neolithic site dating back 8,000 to 7,000 years ago was discovered in Hunan province, just 70 kilometers directly north of Jiahu village at Peiligang village, Xinjiang. Peiligang culture predates Yangshao culture, and it appears to be a precursor of Yangshao culture. The discovery of Peiligang culture pushed the history of Chinese civilization back a further 1,000 years. Chinese archaeologists regard its discovery as a major breakthrough in the history of Chinese archaeology. Yangshao culture was discovered in Mianchu, Hunan province in the year 1921 by Swedish archaeologist Johan Gunnar Andersson. The pottery discovered at the site clearly did not belong to the early stage of pottery making. The level of agriculture and housing construction from that period had reached the level of the Neolithic age. At that time, Chinese researchers had already discovered the Zhoukou-Dian site in the suburbs of Beijing, which dates back from 15,000 to 10,000 years ago, a period that spans the middle and late stages of the Paleolithic age. At that time, people in China had not yet learned to make pottery or grow crops. So, how did people of Yangshao culture acquire the technology and knowledge needed to make pottery and grow crops? There was a gap here in the knowledge of the development of China's prehistoric civilization. The Swedish archaeologist Andersson tried to account for this gap by proposing a Western origin for early Chinese civilization. He proposed that the source of early Chinese culture was either Babylon or Crete. Many Western scholars backed up Andersson's assertion with questionable reasoning, and they concluded that Chinese civilization had its origins in the West. That is to say, that the reason China's prehistoric Paleolithic age culture made the leap to Neolithic age culture was that the inhabitants of China at that time somehow acquired advanced production techniques from the West. The discovery of the ruins at Peiligang filled in the gap between Yangshao culture, which dated back 7,000 years ago, and the previously known prehistoric culture. This effectively refuted the theory of the Western origins of Chinese culture. When Zhu Zhi read a paper in an academic journal about the artifacts excavated at Peiligang, which consisted mainly of red clay utensils for storing and cooking grain, he was startled by their extraordinary similarity to the articles he had in his possession. Zhu Zhi made a systematic comparison of the articles Jia Jiangguo had brought him and the cultural relics unearthed at Peiligang. He discovered that there were extraordinary similarities between them in terms of the production methods and the materials used. This made him wonder if buried under Jiahu village there were ruins of a prehistoric site. Zhu Zhi had thought about the possibility of discovering an ancient site on the outskirts of the village for more than 10 years. He now realized his opportunity had finally arrived.
我父亲，就是说认为这个东西很像看过的，就是说这个文物刊物上的一些新发现的一些这个佩里冈时期的一些东西。结果呢，他后来就把这个事情向那个上级文物部门进行了汇报。后来正是那一次是全国这个文物大普查期间。这个省文物研究所就派那个当时的文物专家，还那个周道啊，这个赵世刚等他们来到实地进行了考察。考察以后认为也确实就是一处佩里冈时期的这个文化遗址。
Upon hearing the experts' suggestion, the Wuyang County government immediately declared the Jiahu ruins an officially protected county-level cultural site. They fenced off the area on the eastern side of Jiahu village and forbade any unauthorized digging. Even though the site was only registered at the county level, it still received a measure of protection. This came as a great relief to Zhu Zhi. In October 1982, an eagerly awaited group of experts from the Academy of Sciences Archaeology Institute, all of whom had worked on the excavation at Peiligang, arrived in Jiahu village. After analyzing and measuring the pottery and stone articles and red baked clay fragments already excavated, The experts confirm that the Jiahu ruins probably predated those at Yangshao and belonged to the early period of the Neolithic age. But then, just as the experts were preparing to carry out an exploratory excavation of the site, a problem arose. They found that the topography of Jiahu village was such that the land was higher on the west side and lower on the east. The ruins lay on the east side in what had been flood retention marshland. Since the 1960s, the marshland had gradually dried up, but the water table was still just 2 meters below the surface. In addition, 3 rivers passed within 3 kilometers of the site, and every autumn, the water level in the rivers reached to within 1.5 meters of the ground surface. The experts determined that if a test dig were carried out recklessly, it might release underground water, causing irreparable damage to the artifacts. In order to ensure the protection of the site, the experts decided to cancel the exploratory dig and wait until the following spring. Until then, they would be reconsidering their options. In the spring of 1983, as Zhu Zhe was awaiting the return of the experts from the Archaeology Institute, there came a misfortune for which he was totally unprepared. Due to the pressure of a growing population, the residents of Jiahu village were strongly petitioning for the garden plots above the ruins to be reclassified and incorporated into the village plan so that new homes could be built there. If that were to happen, the secrets of the ruins that were slowly coming to light would be lost forever. Zhu Zhe, who was by then on the verge of retirement, went again to the cultural authorities to request they proceed with the test dig. In May of that year, the Henan Cultural Research Institute sent a team to Jiahu village. Over a period of about 2 weeks, the team dug 3 exploratory pits totaling 50 square meters in the middle of the site. As a result, they discovered 11 storage pits and 17 graves, as well as dozens of pottery and stone articles and tortoise shells used for divination. But then, just as Zhu Zhe saw a ray of hope, the experts suddenly decided to halt the project.
Even while the trial excavation was being conducted at the Jiahu site, archaeologists discovered another important ancient site in Henan province, and this time at Shigu in Changge Prefecture. The experts soon realized that the Shigu site, with its evidently rich trove of artifacts, was potentially more interesting than the Jiahu site. So they shifted their focus to Shigu, and work at Jiahu was abandoned. However, one man, Zhu Zhi, never wavered in his belief that an astonishing secret was buried beneath Jiahu village. In the next edition of our program, we'll bring you more about the excavation at Jiahu village. And please tune in again then. Thank you for staying with us on today's New Frontiers. I'm Ji Xiaojun on CCTV International. Bye for now.